those of you who don't know, this is a portrait of Lisa Torry Smith. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, I'm Brian Middleton, Fort Bend County District Attorney, and today I'm joined by Senator Joan Huffman, State Representative Ron Reynolds, Sheriff Eric Fagan, Director of Bike Texas, Robin Stallings, Elliott Smith, and the Brooks family, the parents of Lisa Torry Smith. On June 18, 2021, Governor Abbott signed into law Senate Bill 1055. The bill was named in honor of Lisa Torry Smith, who tragically died in our county as she crossed a crosswalk walking her son to school. Shortly after I was elected, Lisa's sister, Gina Torry, contacted me concerning the criminal investigation regarding her sister's death. Perplexed with the case, I hired an expert on vehicular crimes, Allison Bainbridge. We ultimately presented the case to the grand jury, and the grand jury declined to return an indictment. It was my belief at that time that the grand jury's decision had a lot to do with the way the law was written. So at that time, I promised Gina Torry and her family that I would work to change the law. And so I went about doing just that. I drafted what is now called the Lisa Torry Smith Act, and I presented it to different legislators, and I was able to convince these two great legislators to sponsor that legislation. Ron Reynolds sponsored it in the House, and Senator Huffman sponsored it in the Senate. Ultimately, the Senate version, Senate Bill 1055, was passed by both houses and sent to the governor, who signed that legislation on June 18th. Now, why is that significant? These two people next to me know why that's significant. This was a very, very contentious legislative session. In a rare act of bipartisanship, these two people were able to successfully obtain the passage of Senate Bill 1055. There were some 3,000 bills passed by both houses. The governor only signed approximately 1,000 of those bills. There were other 100 that he allowed to pass, become law without his signature. So this bill survived great many odds and was passed. And it's fitting that the bill is named in honor of Lisa Torry Smith, something that we typically take for granted, simply walking a child to school, walking across a neighborhood intersection, and to lose a life. Well, there's been a shift in policy in Texas. The Lisa Torry Smith Act changes the law. Now, drivers can be criminally responsible if they cause bodily injury or serious bodily injury if they collide with the pedestrian in a crosswalk. The bill further goes along and requires drivers to stop and yield to pedestrians or cyclists who are properly in an intersection. Too often in our society, we have been guilty of victim blaming, blaming pedestrians and cyclists for being in the road. Well, September 1st, 2021, that changes in Texas. And that has to do to the fine work of all these people standing up here. I traveled to Austin with the family of Lisa Torry Smith, along with Sheriff Fagan, and we provided testimony, tearful at times, but we pleaded with legislators to pass this bill and to fill this gap in our law. And so I'm pleased to announce that as of September 1st, there will be accountability, not just in Fort Bend, but statewide. This law has wide-ranging and far-reaching jurisdiction in Texas, so it doesn't matter if you're in Houston, you're in El Paso, or Dallas, you'll be held to this same standard. So be aware. Tell your friends, tell your family, when you're approaching an intersection, slow down. You see a pedestrian, stop. Your actions may save a life and prevent your incarceration. At this time, I will turn it over to remarks from Senator Huffman, followed by Representative Reynolds.
Thank you. Thank you very much, DA Middleton, and thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this press conference today. I think that we have to stop here to really commend DA Middleton, and I said that publicly in the Senate because I can honestly say I've been doing this now for several years. I don't think I've ever seen an elected prosecutor so determined to get some legislation passed. It was really something because when I first looked at this legislation, though, of course, I was completely sympathetic to what had occurred, and I could see clearly that a crime had occurred and that the person who committed this offense needed to be prosecuted for what they had done. But I could see the difficulty in perhaps persuading legislators to vote for this and for the governor to approve it. But Brian convinced me that, in fact, it was the right thing to do and it could be done. I very much wanted to do it, so we took the plunge. And I think maybe Representative Reynolds, you and I had chatted. I think we both felt that way. It was definitely the right thing to do, so we were going to make a very hard attempt. But it was really DA Middleton really convincing us, and he did it from a very compassionate viewpoint, but also really based on the law, so he should be commended. It was really an honor to be able to carry this legislation. And I think it's important that we let the family know that you made a difference, you know, that your testimony, those who came forward, their tears, bringing it to light, what had really happened on that day when Lisa was innocently walking in a crosswalk with her young son, walking him to school, had every legal right, doing everything properly, and she was killed. Obviously, a beautiful lady, a beautiful, devoted mother by all accounts, very much loved by her family. It's just a complete, really unspeakable tragedy. And so to be able to participate in a process where there is some justice and for the family to come forward with the courage that it takes to talk publicly about such a loss, it just really made a difference. So now, as there's more awareness, as this will make a difference in Texas, I think the light of Lisa will shine upon all of those, and I know we will all work to bring awareness to this law so that it will really make a difference, and Lisa's life will not have been in vain in that loss. So thank you so much, and it's an honor and a privilege to be able to carry legislation for a family like yours. Thank you, and thank you again. And thank you, Representative Reynolds, for working with me. Yes. Great bipartisan work. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Great, thank you.
Good afternoon. It's not much I can add that hasn't been already said by District Attorney Middleton and Senator Joan Huffman, but this was really even more personal for me, being a resident of Siena, having traveled with my own kids in that very intersection where unfortunately she died. And having met the family, I felt a bond as a father of young children who attend school in Siena at a different school. That could have easily been, you know, my wife. And so when I met, you know, the family, it really hit home. And I was so driven by their compassion and their sense of it's not going to bring their daughter back, but if it can help save another life, if they can help prevent this unfortunate incident from happening to another person, that was their mission. And they worked very diligently. And I have to admit, this was the first time that I had ever carried a bill that I actually, you know, was almost embarrassed that I couldn't even get through it after, you know, Mr. Smith spoke. I was literally in tears. And I had to take a moment just to get myself together because it was so compelling. And now to see it come to fruition through a great sense of bipartisanship that really is the model for how things should be done, because a lot of things transcend partisan politics, and there shouldn't be barriers. And we work together collaboratively to make this happen against the odds. As D.A. Middleton said, there were so many bills that you would have thought would have passed this session that either didn't make it through both houses or made it through both House and the Senate and didn't get a sign from the governor or even vetoed. And so we're very grateful for Governor Abbott for signing this into law. And I also finally want to say Sheriff Fagan, his testimony made a difference. And it really shows you that when we come together collaboratively, that anything can happen. When you have the community bringing forth good legislation, good public policy, and legislators that are willing to work diligently across the aisle, elected officials that bring that expert testimony, Bike Texas, everybody, it was a collaborative effort. There was no, big I's and little U's. It was everybody working together for a common good. And that is refreshing to see in Texas. And certainly, Joan, I think you would agree that Congress could learn something from that, right? And finally, I just want to say this. It is my hope, as D. Middleton said, when one reporter called me, he said, what do you really want to see happen from this? I said, I want to see people paying attention when they're in crosswalks. I want to see people thinking twice. When we pass a seatbelt law, there were people who say, what difference is it going to make? Well, if it saves a life, that makes a difference, right? I hope that, as D. Middleton said, with this public service announcements that we intend to do, that people will think twice, that if, God forbid, someone does what happened to, Lisa, that they're prosecuted, that there's teeth in the law for accountability, because of a loophole, there was no accountability in the person that caused the unfortunate death of Ms. Smith. And so I, again, just am so grateful for the collaboration and looking forward to September 1st, when this will officially be the law in the state of Texas. Thank you.
Sheriff, and I just want to let you know, I want to save the family for last because they are why we're here. But Sheriff, would you care to speak?
First, let me say I'm so very grateful this bill passed. I learned about this bill when I was first campaigning, running for sheriff. I met Gina, her sister, and her mother at a tea they were having outside, and I just came, be truthful with you, to campaign to get more votes. But I sat and I talked with them, and they told me what happened, and it touched me. And I promised them, if elected, I would stand with them, whatever they would do to get this bill passed. And after I won, they did contact me, and I want to thank you for that. But this shows that if we all come together, regardless of partisanism, but something that is right, something that is just, something that protects our families and loved ones, we can get anything accomplished. So again, thank you. I want to thank D.A. Brian Middleton for bringing this bill forward, and to thank Senator Huffman and Representative Reynolds for getting it passed. So all I can say is just thank you, and God bless everyone.
Robert, you care to speak?
Sure.
Make sure you introduce yourself.
I'm Robin Stallings, Executive Director of Bike Texas. This is our 30th year of advancing bicycle access, safety, and education in Texas. We have thousands of supporters across Texas that have had close calls, that have lost friends and families as pedestrians and as bicyclists. More than 16% of road fatalities in Texas every year. That's more than 500 people are killed every year as a pedestrian, and slightly few more as bicyclists. This is an important first step towards our goal to get to zero. There shouldn't be one fatality, much less hundreds, and this is a very important step. And we're happy that we have supporters in virtually every legislative district, so they were able to talk to their reps and their senators to give some support to the great work that Senator Huffman and Representative Reynolds did, so that their colleagues knew that there was support in their districts. We were glad we had a small part in this. Thank you.
Before the family comes up, I have to concede that I was a little bit nervous about today's press conference because, like Representative Reynolds and Senator Huffman can attest to, is that I wasn't sure I would be able to do it without getting emotional. We were not able to testify in Austin without being emotional. And it's because of this family and the pain that they experienced and getting to know this beautiful person, Lisa Torry Smith, that motivated all of us to work hard. But what I want the public to know is that from this tragedy, something positive did happen. We live in a hyper-partisan environment. And because of this beautiful person, we were able to come together, putting partisanship aside and doing what's right for people, protecting the public and bringing justice for Lisa Torry Smith. Ellie.
Well, I want to personally thank everyone, including, one that hasn't been thanked yet is the media. We've had a lot of support, and they've risen to the occasion on multiple times, from the beginning to help, shed light on this. So thank you to the media as well. Personally, I want to thank Brian Middleton. He was quarterbacking this whole thing. It would have never happened had he not promised. And he did. He promised us that he would do it, and he fulfilled his promise, which is, something that not everyone does nowadays. And so it is very important that he did that. And really, he brought together the right team. We couldn't have done it with Senator Hoffman. We couldn't have done it without Representative Reynolds, Sheriff Fagan, Robin with Bike Texas bringing his supporters. So I just want to thank everybody for all the time and effort. And to know, unfortunately, no one really knew Lisa besides the family. But I know that she would be very happy with the outcome, because if anyone who knew Lisa knew that she cared more about others than herself. And so she would have been very happy with this outcome. So thank you.
Thank you. I wasn't really prepared to speak. My gratitude goes out to DA Middleton and Senator Huffman and Representative Reynolds and Sheriff Fagan and the media. You all have supported us through these 4 years that we've been traveling down this road. I'd also like to thank my daughter Gina Torry, who can't be here with us today, but she was instrumental in motivating people. I think that's a good word for it. For motivating people, and her love for her sister just drove her to make sure that this law got passed. When Lisa died, a few days after Lisa died, we said we got to make this was senseless death, and we don't want it to happen to other people. So we've got to pass a Lisa law. And then came D.A. Middleton, and he wrote a Lisa law. And he took it to the state Senate. The time and energy that so many people put forth on this, writing letter campaigns, etc., and this passed on the first go-around. I just hope that it saves more lives, because the grief that we feel will always be with us. And it's good to know that there will be families that down the road will be spared deaths because drivers have altered their inattentive driving and are driving better, and thereby saving lives. And that's all I have to say. But thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you, Ms. Brooks. This time we'll take any questions you may have.
I had a couple questions, but they were really answered throughout the press conference. I'll ask one anyway. Why do you think that this legislation, when so many others did not go through, was able to go through all the way and be signed? And I think I know the answer, but maybe we'll get you to respond.
It was the facts. It was the story. Such a wonderful person, and the passion and testimony that was provided to our legislators. you can't know what happened and not be touched. And I think that's what happened in Austin, is that all the legislators who heard the testimony were touched. And it's also, right now, we're experiencing in our country an epidemic of pedestrian deaths. We had this weekend the bike shooting. There was even a story this weekend about bike wars, but we've seen a spike in pedestrian deaths and cyclists being struck. So the time is right. It's time to shift from blaming victims and holding drivers accountable for their action. So I see it as a paradigm shift in our state, and I think Texas is leading our nation with this legislation and taking a stand to protect pedestrians and cyclists and other people using mobility devices in our intersections. What it requires is very simple. Slow down, look. You see a pedestrian, stop. Share the road, save a life, and prevent your incarceration.
Maybe remind us, what are the penalties now, according to the new law, September 1st?
Okay, so under this legislation, if you cause through the act of criminal negligence, failing to keep a proper lookout, and you cause bodily injury to a pedestrian, a cyclist, or someone operating a mobility device in a crosswalk intersection, then it's punishable as a Class A misdemeanor, which means you can be incarcerated up to a year in jail and up to a $4,000 fine. If that same act causes serious bodily injury, then you could be punished up to a state jail felony, which is 6 months to 2 years incarceration and up to a $10,000 fine. So very heavy penalties. So drivers, if you want to avoid these penalties, there's a new duty: slow down, stop when you see pedestrians, keep a proper lookout, keep our streets safe, and save a life and save an incarceration.
And if it results in death?
Well, there could be higher charges, but right now under this statutory framework, serious bodily injury would include death. So
the max is a year or two? Is that what you said? The
state,
maximum penalty?
under a state jail felony, the punishment range is 6 months to 2 years incarceration in the state jail facility.
Can you explain actually the difference between the law before and now? How the loophole, like,
Okay.
how it is?
The change in the law is this. Before, these cases may have been prosecuted as simply as criminally negligent homicide, which is a catch-all provision in our statute, in our penal code. Difficult to follow. And in my opinion, it probably contributed to the result in Lisa's case. Now you have a very specific statute that's easy to track. Grand jurors and petty jurors can now have a roadmap to follow as to what is illegal. And it also is informative to the public of what is required of drivers. So now, in the event of a prosecution, drivers are now aware of a new duty. And grand jurors who make these decisions can follow this simple law, understanding what the duties are and what type of conduct is prescribed by the statute.
So that the statute prescribes what the driver should do at the crossing section?
Right. It describes stopping and yielding. I mean, it's a framework. For what's expected of drivers.
This was not there before.
Right. That's correct.
Do you want to say what happened to Lisa's driver?
Yeah. Ms. Brooks asked me to mention what happened to the driver in Lisa Torry Smith's case. I kind of went over it in the beginning of the conference, but we presented it to a grand jury, and the grand jury no-billed it, which means they declined to indict the driver. I think possibly that result would have been different if we had the Lisa Torry Smith Act, because they would have had a statute, a specific statute to track and follow. And that's why we went to Austin.
In her case, was it distracted driving that caused the accident, or what do we know really what?
It would be improper.
The driver told us, I guess.
It would be improper for me to comment on that, but I would say that with this statute, you probably would have gotten a different result.
Was there something about the criminally negligent homicide charge that was
vague enough that made a grand jury hesitant to indict somebody on that, in your mind?
Right, it didn't provide a lot of guidance for grand juries to follow. It's so broad and nebulous as it's defined, is difficult to grasp what facts are being prescribed by the statute. Now we have specific acts, crosswalks, it's defined clearer now under the law.
Could you speak to specifically the prevalence of this issue, the reckless driving and pedestrian deaths in Fort Bend County, and also how this law compares to other states?
Well, my understanding is this, and this is just from reading, probably the paramount expert in this field is Angie Schmidt, and she just recently released a book on this topic. 2018 was the highest number of pedestrian deaths in the United States, and then compared to the 10 years before that, we saw a huge increase. Ms. Schmidt, in her book, attributed it to wider streets, faster vehicles. These streets are being like Highway 6 near residential areas, or even Sienna Ranch where this death occurred, is that people are moving faster down these wider thoroughfares and not being alert. In terms of exact numbers for Fort Bend, I'm not prepared to answer that question right now, but Texas Department of Transportation does have some statistics that I will send you that are Texas specific, that describes the same epidemic in Texas. So, all right, no further questions?
I wanted to add one thing to his original question. One of the things that really made a compelling difference, in a lot of times you get a bill that's brought to you by a constituent, they leave it up to you to work it, right? And then some bills where there is a lobbyist, they may have a hired person that has a vested interest in helping you work it. This family, they literally worked it. Gina, Torry, they worked the members. They made phone calls. They sent letters. They followed up, and they solicited co-authors and joint authors in the House, and that made a difference in the House. It was almost stuck in what we call the Calendars Committee, where you got to get a bill first through the hearing, passed out of the committee, which it passed unanimously, but then it has to go through the Calendars Committee. And then so many bills die in the Calendars Committee. They worked the Calendars Committee. Who can we call? Bike Texas. They got engaged, and they made sure that the members of the Calendars Committee made this bill a priority. So those are some of the pitfalls and hurdles that other bills have to overcome, that this family took it upon themselves to personally spend their time and resources to come to Austin, and they did it on multiple occasions. So to me, in addition to the great work of Senator Huffman and D.A. Middleton and Sheriff Fagan, it was the personal follow-up and follow-through all the way through the end, where we didn't know if we were going to get it across the finish line. I was concerned because it was getting late. Senator Huffman was very gracious in getting the bill passed pretty soon. I mean, I think you heard the bill, and you maybe had it voted out the same day. I mean, that was Herculean. So
I moved it.
She moved it fast. She moved it fast. Well, I had to, I'm not a chair, so she's a little bit more powerful, and I had to really work it a little bit harder in the House. But long story short, it was really the family and their determination, and I think fate and everything had a lot to do with it. But it was really, I just wanted the family to know that their personal involvement made a tremendous difference. And it wasn't that they were, paid lobbyists that were trying to get some bill passed because someone was getting paid. It was because it was close to their heart and their daughter and their wife and their sister. That, to me, made a tremendous difference from the House perspective.
Okay, thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.